Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm really excited today to be sitting here with my guest, Craig Kamman, who has been in real estate for over 30 years as both a real estate agent and also in the real estate investment space. He's been through multiple different market cycles and has given him a lot of experience in construction, investing, flipping, property management, and real estate development as well. So, in today's episode, Craig is going to be sharing with us some of his experience in all of those realms of real estate, but also kind of explaining the benefits of being almost like a hybrid investor agent, flipping houses, investing in real estate, but also being a great real estate agent and serving others that want to buy and sell as well. So, Craig, welcome to the show, man. Super
Uh,
excited to have you here.
Thanks, Kobe. So quite an introduction.
Yeah, I mean, you've
Thank
done
you.
a lot in real estate, and I would love for you, before we get started, to share just a little bit about kind of what that 30 years has been like for you and what is just your overall background as somebody who has so much experience in real estate.
Okay. I don't know where to begin. It's like you, I got started pretty young in the business. I didn't do the college route. I just school wasn't for me. I did some construction. I had a small business. Did some construction cleanup, worked with builders, and then did some general construction labor and got introduced to a lot of the different trades that way. And then I started working with a builder, and I became his job soup. So he had me basically hand me the lot blueprint and permit. I was in my early 20s, so this was probably 91, 92. And then I'd deliver that house to closing. So I'd coordinate everything and get it delivered to closing. And then I got licensed in real estate to kind of sell the models. And then the market went through some ups and downs. Then just kind of went into full time real estate sales. Did some my first house. Boy, I think I was 20 when I bought my first house, and that I got it down to the frame and rebuilt it, and so I was just always involved in it. And I have family in the construction background too, so that made it kind of easier. um, and then real estate from there, I guess I just kind of worked into the traditional real estate role as selling houses. And then I ended up getting my builder's license and then partnering up with the builder. We started building higher end homes, and then started developing real estate, finding land for these. This was in the going into 2004, like 99 through the early 2000s. So going into that bubble, there were a lot of investors looking for land. So I was putting land deals together, and then got involved, and we did three condominium projects. So sitting on about 150 units, and then the whole market came crashing down. So starting over, and rode that whole cycle down, and then I wasn't able to end up buying when the bottom of the market hit. Even though I had all the skills and everything needed, I was so buried from the projects. I was unbankable, so I couldn't really get back on my feet very easy. So I really didn't get back started till about 2014 before I could kind of pick up the pieces again. So
Yeah. Yeah, man. So there's not a lot of
kind of
people,
a
I think,
mouthful.
in the industry who's gone through that cycle, right? Because a lot of people who maybe have gotten their license in the past 4 years or so, like myself, right? Maybe this is kind of like the first time they've ever experienced like a bad market here in just 2023 and 2024 as we kind of end up and round out the year. But you've been through it, right? Like you mentioned, you kind of lost pretty much everything around that 2008 crash. So,
Mhm.
maybe kind of share a little bit of experience in that. What was it like? What would you have done differently? And what are some lessons that you took from that when you were starting up again back in 2014 that's allowed you to kind of sustain that until now?
Well, I wish YouTube was around, and the internet, to have all this, sharing of knowledge out there. So, I mean, you can jump on YouTube and you can learn stuff that, you didn't learn any other way than trial and error, previously. Um, so part of my plan is to go back through is I don't want to repeat that again. So my whole business plan before it was capital returns, right? You buy a property, you fix it up, or you build on it, and then you sell it and you take your margin. And that's very, a lot can happen. You take down some land, you're going to build a condo project or townhomes or something. That could take you 2 years before you're ready to sell. The world can change in 2 years. So that becomes kind of high risk. And then really wasn't that familiar. I did have some rentals. I really didn't appreciate how lucrative the rental income could be, and how that could provide the base to take out the troughs. So as I was going through that down cycle, and I'm scrambling to come up with closings, I was talking to a friend in the business, and it's like, No problem. His rentals cover everything." And I'm like, wow, what a position to be in. So that was my goal, and I've achieved it now. So you talk about getting into the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's quite a roller coaster just in those 4 or 5 years. We experienced what I would call the early 2000s on irrational exuberance, right? You had these low interest rates, multiple offers, people didn't pass and waive in inspections, and anything to buy. And it felt very much like the early 2000s. And I was just kind of, I was always like, well, when's that other shoe going to drop? I've seen this movie before. So I was kind of concerned about that. So I kept building my rental portfolio to try to ride out that trough when it did crash. And then we did crash with the high interest rates. Now I expected prices to come down with it, but I didn't really see. I knew we were short of inventory, but I didn't realize that we could still increase prices like we did with the shortage of inventory. So now we've got pending sales down. What is that at? Like 96 levels, 1996, and the population's that much more. So just in the last 4 or 5 years, we've done quite an extreme on markets. So the lessons, getting in the last 4 or 5 years is, you know, hopefully you won't ever have to repeat these 4 or 5 years, because that's an unhealthy market, both sides of it. You kind of want something in between, but that's not the way things roll. So,
Yeah. So what are some things that you've done like on the agent side of things, right? Because as an investor, you've learned that keeping that rental income is going to be a good, almost like a good hedge against whatever is happening in the market. But on the agent side, are you also adjusting your marketing, or are you just now focusing more so on the investment side of things because of the way market has been going?
so my business is down to basically referrals and my repeat clients. So I'm not looking to grow the business like I was when I was younger. So it's not so much as, going for the sale as everyone thinks salespeople do. It's more just advising my network on what to do, what their situation is. They need to sell, or should they wait? So I'm not really pivoting anything on the business. I'm just being steady, right? My livelihood isn't dependent on it anymore. Now I can just absolutely, you know, it doesn't matter if I get the sale or not. I'm just going to advise them with what the best route to go, my opinion, is for them. Give them their what their options are. So that gives a lot of freedom in the business. So I don't understand why more agents don't get investment property to kind of ride out that wave, so they don't go through these highs and lows, like the market cycles kind of drive people through. And then once an agent starts getting desperate on a sale, then that's when bad things happen. And you know you probably see it in your office, as agents struggle to make house payments and stuff like that. um most of them are pretty good, but there just takes a couple of them to create problems. So I haven't really changed the business. I just approach it as I'm dealing with, my past clients, my friends, my sphere, and just be that steady advisor on, the source that they can go to. Um,
Yeah, so that's a good point on what you just mentioned here about agents who can create a lot of problems if they're desperate for a sale,
mhm.
right? And that was the other thing I really wanted to get your take on, because there's a few investor agents that are out there. I think there's been recently more people than there were before, even just from 4 years ago. But you mentioned the importance of real estate agents needing to, buy more rental properties, or also looking into the investment side, creating some type of residual income so that way they're not having to rely and be desperate on their next sale. Is that something that you've always done? I know you've been in construction when you first started in real estate, or was there something that kind of clicked as you were, growing your sales business that said, hey, I need to go in there and start investing, or I'm going to be one of these people who are going to start causing problems, down the line.
Yeah, when that 2007, 2008 hit, just seeing that the power of that residual income, and then starting to realize the compounding effect of rental business, right? Before I'd look at it and say, well, that's a lot of work for $200 a month or $300 a month, right? But I didn't see the big picture. I didn't see that growth over time. And I had some rentals, and every time I'd get a little rent increase, the city would increase their taxes, right? So I was just kind of like barely treading water. I'm like, well, you can't really, get ahead this way. So I didn't really see the big picture. And then I started listening to some of these podcasts, and then it started clicking, right? It's like, okay, now I'm starting to see it, and then I can see it over time. I look back on my real estate career, and there's always those deals that that you think about the girl that got away or whatever, back in high school, right? So I see these real estate deals that were in my lap here, basically. There was a house, the owner said they were in foreclosure, and they said, it's yours. We can't, we tried to sell it, we couldn't sell it. Just pay the mortgage, we'll sign it over to you. It's $15,000. And today that house is worth about 400. It's, why didn't I do it? It was that fear. I didn't understand that I could put a renter in there and pay for it, right? I wasn't thinking that that knowledge base was very small. That knowledge base is compounded with the internet now. I mean, you and I, we're on the opposite end of the country, and we're sharing information. We jump on school, and we share ideas on real estate. That didn't exist before. It was, who was in my local office, did they work rentals, that kind of thing. And if you didn't happen to connect into that world, it was very hard to learn that. But now you just have to search for it online, and you can tap into just so much, wisdom and knowledge out there, and learn this stuff so much faster. It's game changing. So that's why I said I wish this was around earlier. Would have saved me a lot of grief and aggravation.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure, right? Because there's a lot of people who, they still think they have to go out there, and I think there's merit in paying for certain types of coaching and courses
Mhm.
as well. But I think people underestimate the amount of free, valuable information that is out there on the internet today, like YouTube channels, like the one that you're putting on as well, and
Mhm.
some of the people in our circle about rental investing and building wealth in real estate, and mistakes to avoid essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just to understand the basics on it. And you're going to find that teacher when you need it. Like, when you start out your investing journey, you may get something from me to start you out on it, but you don't know the next step. And then suddenly they're listening to you, and oh, that's the next step. And then they find the whatever. When you're ready for that information, you'll find it. So just kind of have faith that's all out there. You don't really have to pay for it, like you said. Everyone's sharing their experience, and just, it's a big collaborative effort. And that's not, we're not looking for a return on it. We're just sharing what we went through. So it's kind of fun. I don't know if anything like this has ever existed in the world. You can tell I'm kind of old because this technology still amazes me, but you know,
Yeah, I mean it's funny how people just are so willing to share, right? And you,
mhm,
you mentioned not everybody's trying to get a return on it. Now, obviously some people are, and that's okay, right? If they're putting out
yep,
free information and there's making it back some other way, that's it's a win-win for everybody. But I think, to kind of pivot back a little bit to the importance of investing in real estate, right? So do you think that having your real estate license or being a real estate agent gives you any sort of advantage as far as becoming an investor? Because there are investors out there who are not licensed and they're
mhm,
doing quite well as well. And there's people, of course, are always thinking about, should I become an agent? Should I get my license if I'm also, just wanting to get into investing? Now, you did mention that you had a deal come across your table. Is that something that you think is a valuable trade-off to getting your real estate license and having that advantage in your back pocket?
Boy, that's a great question, and I've been asked this before. So there's kind of several answers to this. The first response is you get a real estate license, no matter what state you're in. You're held to a different standard. The courts are going to look at you much differently. If you go in there and you do some of this stuff that the courts might perceive you as taking advantage of someone in a difficult situation, they're going to rake you over the coals. You're going to lose your license. You're going to be hefty fines. You're held to a much higher standard than if you were just out there doing it on your own. Now, the advantage of being licensed is you're required to do all this continuing ed. So you're going to know the real estate laws, and you're not going to be doing ignorant things, right? You're gonna know when you're crossing a line. And then when you're running rental properties, you're going to understand fair housing. You're going to understand the protected classes. You're going to understand the process you have to go through to be, basically legal and operating the business the way you should be. So I see the benefits of being a realtor as understanding the real estate laws and the rules and with all involved there. Not so much the deals coming through. You can find deals on your own. There's that wholesale model, um, what's that? We buy ugly houses, the home investors, and then there's lots of YouTube channels on how to or how to wholesale yourself, and market to foreclosures, high equity owners, that kind of thing. So that stuff is out there. You can do that, and you can find those on your own. You don't need to be licensed for it. The difference between you and I, we go in and we're gonna go into a wholesale business is we have to play that game a little straighter than some of these are held to. And there's been some stuff going on where these wholesalers in some states, the states are now requiring wholesalers to be licensed for that ethics component. So that game is changing. If that game changes more, then I'd probably say, yeah, it's more important to get your real estate license. The other downside of the real estate license is it ain't a free gig. You know, you're going to have to pay your board dues. You're going to have to pay your state, your local, and your national association dues. You're going to have to pay your continuing education. We're at 15 hours a year here. I don't know where you're at in Texas, and then so much of that's fair housing and ethics. And, so there's a lot involved with that. And then you got to pay your MLS fees. And then, well, now the MLS is regulated. So all that information is available for free online anyhow. So you don't get an advantage there. And the commissions, those aren't published anymore. And everyone's after your commissions. So there's the way I figure it is there's probably running about, you got to clear about 35,000 a year in overhead, pay your license. If you're going down that road. Now there's ways you can do it cheap if you're just trying to get access to the MLS. You can probably shave quite a bit off of that with broker fees and stuff. Get your limited broker's license or something. What do you think? You've been around for a while.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, right? It's interesting what you mentioned about being held to a higher standard, because that's what I think a lot of investors are thinking about, right? They don't necessarily. I'm not saying they're doing anything unethical, but it's just
Mm.
they feel like that could be potentially harmful in their business, right? And there's the other class of investors. A lot of them here that I know here in Texas are thinking that as a, kind of the opposite end. They think that it's actually a positive thing to be held to a higher standard because, they can now go into negotiation with a homeowner and, present themselves as a licensed professional, right? Because that is a disclosure, at least here, you have to make, even if you're, not using your license on the
Mm-hmm.
transaction. So those are some positive things. Now, one of the other things that I would think about is, if you're an investor going out there, maybe you can touch on this as well if this is something that you've done. Now that your business is more referrals as well. Um, is if you're going out there and prospecting sellers directly, are you finding that there's some sellers that you're just not necessarily able to help with, your investment side of the business, and you can capitalize on that lead because you're licensed, whether you want to list it for them or you want to just send it out as a referral. versus other investors who aren't licensed, they might not be able to capitalize on those kind of higher equity homeowner leads.
Yeah, I kind of run into situations where, and I'll find older people, they're moving out. This is kind of their last, move out, and they're looking at the wholesale opportunity. And, I've got in and said, okay, you can get pricing from, name some of these wholesalers that'll come in and give them an offer. I said, I'd gladly match one of those offers. Or if you put it on the MLS, you'd have to do X, Y, and Z, clean it up to a certain point, and then give them kind of a range on what I think they might be able to get for it. Right. So that stuff has come back around, and they brought the wholesalers in, and they come in and they give them a price, and they're like, wow, that's a great price. And I said, okay, run with it. And then they do a home inspection, and then they try to renegotiate everything. And then they come back to me and said, you were right. I said, yep. I said, I'll pay you what they originally offered, no inspection. Boom. Or let's put it on the MLS, do this, we'll get you a higher price. So that does come into effect. But it's you talk about that higher standard, you're giving them several options, right? So it's not like you're trying to build a business, you're providing a service to these people. I can buy this from you at this price, but I'm not wearing that investor hat. I'm wearing the hat as I'm going to provide you service on how to unload your property. It's a much different mindset than a wholesaler going in. I got to buy this at a certain price to generate my profit and stuff like that. It's you see, it gets tricky in some situations. So, but all we can do is provide information and let them make their best decision. Usually, they end up making the right choice that works best for them, and you just kind of you win some, you lose some, and as long as they come out, you know, good, that's what you look for. So you don't
Yeah.
need every deal.
Right, just the right ones. And that's
Yeah.
the other thing I think, as an investor we could touch on as well. But I'm really glad that you brought that up where you can now go in as more of a service provider, right? You don't have to just stick with one option like most wholesalers do because they have to get the certain price on the home and they
Hmm.
can only provide one option, right? They can't like if the homeowner wanted to like list on the MLS, the wholesaler gets nothing
Right.
essentially from that. If they're licensed, maybe they get a referral on that, even if they don't
They
want to
could
list.
refer it and get a referral fee, correct? But if they're not licensed, they can't collect the referral fee. That's yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was one of the benefits a lot of investors, if you're doing enough of prospecting directly to
Mhm.
homeowners, could potentially be a good opportunity because now you can go in and you can have a better conversation, more from a I'm serving you here are the two, three different options you can go with. And then also being able to capitalize on all of those options if somebody is actually motivated to sell their home.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring that up, and you could probably build a pretty good reputation in business in your community,
Yeah.
as the go-to source. If you got connected with some of these attorneys that deal with, probates or nursing homes taking in, families, you could probably be a pretty good referral source if you built a solid reputation of always just looking out for their best interests. So that's not a bad business model, and maybe that's what things should come to. The wholesale business was kind of the Wild West for a while. So,
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of states are actually regulating wholesalers, right? Requiring them to get licensed. I know Illinois and Oklahoma are really the kind of two that come up.
yeah. And there's several others. I forget which ones, but yeah.
Yeah, so it makes sense to consider that, right? If you're in a state and you're doing a lot of wholesaling, and you're in a state that's a little bit more regulated, potentially consider getting your license, right? Even if you don't want to use it, you could potentially not necessarily be like a quote unquote realtor. You could hang your license with like a referral
Hmm.
type brokerage and pay like a really reduced fee and not have to join the board of the MLS and
Yeah.
just having it, right? And being able to collect referral fees on that.
Right. Get a network of agents that work certain markets and just refer business to them and create that pipeline. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a bad business model. You got me thinking.
Right. You can use your license
Yeah.
for something, something to capitalize on for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So, you mentioned having that as a solution provider, I think it triggers some interesting thoughts as well as far as being, niching down. There's a lot of investors that like to niche down as far as prospecting for certain types of sellers. You mentioned probate, people moving, with family members moving into senior living communities has been recently a more popular strategy as well amongst kind of savvy investors who understand that. There's always, of course, foreclosures, divorce attorneys, um,
Mhm.
you know, code violations is another one that's kind of industry as well. Have you ever niched down before, or are you kind of been marketing towards homeowners more generally?
I haven't really niched down. For a while I was in the development, new construction, but as far as my investment, my niche would be I just try to acquire certain properties in my buy box. But as far as going out there as like a wholesaler or acquiring properties as a service, I haven't pursued that as the front engine of the business, right? And that's kind of our conversation has kind of given me a little bit of a paradigm shift on, that could be the front end of the business versus being the realtor. You could go out and you're going to niche down into these different, you know people of need on, whether it's probate, with the attorneys and the families, or going into assisted living, that kind of thing, or the what are the bankruptcies or high, whatever. So yeah, you could niche down in that and really have that the driving engine, and then yeah, build everything off of that, rather than I've always approached it from the old school model as the realtor, and then these were auxiliary services.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself clear, because my brain is running with ideas right now. So
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad I
that's why
can.
these conversations are awesome.
Yeah, you never know what's gonna come up, right? That can trigger an interesting thought that can turn into an idea and a plan for your business later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that makes sense. Like what you're talking about. Just acquiring properties and being kind of on the front end of, the service, right? Because if you're thinking about being a real estate agent, there's two sides of that, right? There's the prospecting side, getting in front of people, which
Hmm.
is very important, but there's also the service side, right? Actually helping somebody close a transaction. I think a lot of agents are more veering towards the first side, which is the marketing side, people who are savvy and prospecting, getting in front of homeowners, and they're kind of veering away from the service side, which comes with its own set of headaches, right? Of working with clients and having to deal with scheduling and calendar issues as well.
You're pretty seasoned. You've been around this business, and you know how tough this business is. And the what is the failure rate on this? Is it like 80% won't make it past a year?
Yeah,
Still that
somewhere
high?
around 80%, north of 80%.
Yeah, it's north of 80% won't survive a year in this business. But everyone perceives this as a really easy business. All you do is unlock doors, right? The amount of prospecting that has to go in to gaining someone's trust for their largest purchase, and then the amount of service work once that contract is signed to actually get that house to closing. The amount of legwork, especially for a buyer's agent,
Hmm.
they end up doing the heavy lifting, because everything seems to go wrong on the buyer's side. The financing, the inspections, the appraisals, the if it's going to fall apart, it's usually on the buy side, and the buyer's agent is trying to handle all that. So very few people have the power to do that prospecting, pick up that phone, get out there, take that rejection in sales, and then be able to have the ability to hold everyone together calmly while things go wrong and look like it's easy. So it's not for the faint of heart, this business. And it gets tougher because you got more and more rules on it every day. Now you have commissions that are kind of becoming more and more challenging to work with, and it's yeah. So the idea of niching in this business makes sense. So I do like what you're talking about, is focusing in on that niche side versus just going out in the business, because this business chews people up and spits them out in the first year because they think it's easy. If
Right.
yeah, if you survive 5 years, you're gonna yeah, you're in this business for life. You'll never be able to hold a real job.
Right. I think that's the biggest misconception of people coming in, right? They think they're going to have none of the restrictions of a real job, but all the freedom, right, of owning a business. And it's like kind of the opposite of that, where your schedule is so much more hectic, but you just have to choose which 24 hours you have to work during the day.
Yes, exactly. You do have some of that freedom where you can fit things into your schedule, but you try to go on vacation, no. Yeah. You go down and you go hang out on the beach, you see someone on the cell phone, and guaranteed they're in the real estate business, right? Because
Yeah.
the minute you leave, something goes wrong.
Right. It's always like that, right? It's the moment you step out, something goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's that's kind of why I'm a little bit reluctant on recommending someone get their real estate license, because it's a big expense and it's a very hard business to make money in. And a few people make really big money in it, but most people get washed out in their first year.
Yeah, and that's I think a lot of what the reason why agents are, moving away from that, moving away from even just the service side. They're really into the generating lead side. They build out more kind of referral networks,
Yep.
right? Handing them out to newer agents who come in, building some sort of rainmaker team within their local market has always been kind of the route that a lot of more seasoned agents are going.
Hmm.
And there's also like the distinction between like trying to make money as a real estate agent, but also just having a license and maybe just holding it or just going through the course and see what's out there, taking the, continuing education in your state to get
Yep.
familiar with the laws as well. So that is a big distinction. I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because it's one thing to be licensed and another to be a real estate agent making money in a business.
Takes a different breed to do that.
So right. Yeah. And you brought up the new rules coming into the industry with the whole AAR lawsuit. It's interesting kind of from what I've seen. I personally haven't seen just from agents that I know in different markets as well. Not a ton of change as far as the way they approach things. And usually these are the agents who are already approaching things, I would say, not necessarily the correct way, but there's a reason why they've been in the industry and they've been producing in the industry, right? They've always
Mhm.
gotten buyer agreements signed before even showing houses. They've always kind of followed the protocol. Have you seen anything within your market or circle of agents that you know? Has there been any major changes that you've seen?
No, most sellers are still willing to pay the buyer's agent commission. There's a little bit different conversation with the buyer up front, and some of the buyers are a little shocked that you can't show a house without having the contract signed. Yeah, you're either going to need the buyer rep agreement signed or just this showing agreement, right? And they're pretty non-threatening contracts, but most people aren't used to having that for the first showing. Normally, you kind of have that first, second showing to kind of build that trust on with new clients rather than shoving paperwork in their face right away. But the interesting thing on the sellers is some of the sellers were, oh yeah, now I don't have to half the commission goes away. I don't have to pay the buyer's agent commission. And then you talk to the sellers and say, well, think about it. The buyer still has to pay that commission. So it's going to come off the price. So you're either going to negotiate that commission upfront with me now, or we're going to negotiate it, or the buyer's negotiating that commission, and then is going to be reflected in your price. Do you want to control that commission, or do you want the buyer to control that commission? You know, that's the reality of the situation, because it's going to come off the net. The net is going to be what the seller's concerned about. Now, I know the intent on the lawsuit is to have the buyers pay their agent and then the seller pay their agent. But in the practicality of things, you know, like I said, the buyer's agent does the heavy lifting. So if I were a buyer, I'd say, okay, I'm going to pay you 4%, negotiate the best deal on me, and take it out of the seller's hide. I'm going to get the barracuda going after the seller rather than trying to create a win-win situation. So I'm not seeing that happen. But that's the reality. And once people kind of understand, well, the buyer has to come up with all that extra cash, then the sellers kind of come to terms with, yeah, that's fair, you know, and they'll pay it. There's a few people that don't, but you kind of work that out in the contract. I haven't run into too much of that, but it's out there. But I think for the most part, it's business as usual.
Yeah.
Slightly different conversation is all.
Right, exactly. Just really interesting point that you brought up because there's been a lot of takes on like what's going to happen to the buyer's agent. A lot of
Mhm.
agents have, and I don't know if they actually mean this or they're just saying it for views, but they're saying things like the buyer's agents are going to go away because it doesn't make any sense for you to negotiate a lower commission for yourself. But you painted the other side of that picture, which is I'm going to take a higher percentage, but I'm going to negotiate a better deal for my buyer.
Yep. Because the buyer's agent is the hard work. The seller's agent with all the technology, that's where all the cost savings is. I mean, put it on the internet. Okay, take some beautiful pictures. Now there's some AI apps that'll stage it for $5, right? So there's not much the seller agent has to do as much anymore, right? Maybe write some flowery description that the chat GPT can do for them, right? So that's where the savings is at. The hard work is still on the legwork of the buyer's agent.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. I actually built a custom GPT that specifically does those things for the the seller's agent, which is
Okay.
writing all the description and marketing for their listings and open houses that they're hosting. So,
Yeah, yeah. The buyer's agent is so undervalued out there, and the perception of what they do is so misconstrued with reality. You take the buyer's agent out of the picture, and nothing's going to get done.
right. Yeah, that's what it yeah, you hear the stories of sellers agents not even answering the phone for 2 hours or
Yep.
however amount of time. So I'm really glad because it's a different point of view. I haven't heard any agent talk about this before about just the value of the buyer's agent, but also how they can create a situation where they're earning more commission or just as much commission, but also serving the interest of the buyer. And now if you're a buyer's agent out there, you specialize in this, this
Mhm.
is potentially a conversation you can now have, right? Maybe I charge a higher percentage, but I'm going to negotiate 10% off the sales
Mhm.
price for you if you have that skill, of course.
Yep. And the markets are going to dictate a lot of that, right? When we're in the 2020 to 2022, and it's whatever 100,000 over asking price, no inspection, no nothing, and you know it's pretty tough to go beat up a seller. We're coming into a market. If you're a buyer in this market, these high interest rates, you're paying a high interest rate. Some of these sellers are going to be, their backs against the wall. So if you can find a motivated seller, absolutely. Now's your opportunity. Once we come out on the other side of this, we're probably going right back into another crazy buyer's market, or a seller's market, I should say. So if you can buy in the next year, I would do it even if the rates are higher because I think this is the time to buy. We're going to make it through the other side of these interest rates, and things will be normalized, and you know we'll be back to a feeding frenzy again at some point.
It's the cycle, right? And I'm sure you can talk about this better than anybody else, right? Having been in real estate for 30 plus years, it's just the cycle. No, drought's going to last forever. No peak is going to last forever either. So you just have to be able to understand which cycle.
Sometimes they feel like they do.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing, right? But you haven't been through it. You know the strategies to go through both the valleys and peaks.
Yep. Yep. So the money's going to be made in the next year or so. If you can buy the properties, buy them now. And at some point you'll be able to refi it. Don't overextend yourself where you're going to go under if rates don't come down or don't come down for a long time. But at some point, rates will dip again, and yeah, you'll make it through the other end of this, and it'll be a good purchase down the road. So
For sure,
lots
man.
of opportunities out there.
Yeah, there is I'm sure having that mindset has helped you through the past couple of decades in real estate as well because you can look for opportunities or you can look for issues. It's up to you what you want to focus on, I think.
Yeah, that mindset changes, because it's you go through the ups and downs,
Yeah.
right? You ride that market, and your income's going up and down with this. That's why people don't survive this business, is they can't handle the ups and downs of that income stream. You know, it's that steady paycheck is very addictive.
And I think we were talking about this right on a previous show. We're both part of a live stream where agents, if they're in a good market, what do? They go crazy, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what you should be doing, right?
No, no, it's I mean, things are going to be fine. It's just you got to weather the storm. If you're an agent, diversify a little bit, get some rental properties, take advantage of this. It's that little extra income stream can take a lot of pressure off. um, so whatever you got to do to survive it, and then just get to the other end of this. um, but I think the opportunity is in the buyer's agent right now, and I think most people miss that boat. So um, everyone's focusing in on how technology's changed everything, and I think it's the more technologies out there. It's like if I'm going through YouTube, I can't even listen to any YouTube channels that have that deep voice and the dramatic music behind it. It's all AI generated and it's all bogus. It's like, guys, that clickbait, I got suckered into it again. And I get angry every time I get one of those videos. So just that personal relationship on having a video where we have a conversation like this versus something like kind of fake and phony. So everyone's going into AI is going to sell all this real estate stuff. When you're a buyer, you're going through the biggest purchase in your life. I think that personal connection, that trustworthiness with one-on-one with an agent that you've hired to go negotiate the best deal for you, that's going to have more value than a seller that's going to create some chat GPT description and some pretty photos. And I think that the whole value structure is flipped upside down in that argument right now. So, and I think we'll start to see that play out over the next couple of years. But I feel like kind of the Lone Ranger out there talking about it. So,
Well, keep talking about it because it's an interesting take, and people really understand what you're saying and the reasoning behind it. Then they will take advantage of that opportunity as the buyer's agent. Because you're right, it is now the biggest opportunity. Anytime there's change, there's opportunity. You just have to be able to find it and create it.
mhm,
So I'm really glad you kind of brought that up as well because it really kind of opened my eyes. I've never really thought about it specifically when you talked about negotiating a higher commission. Um,
mhm.
that's really a good way to approach things, I think, as a buyer's agent.
What's your median price that in your market there? Is it about
I think
400, 500?
yeah, around it depends on what part of the market that you're specifically talking about, but around just kind of the metro area, staying now probably closer to 400.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say average commission, call it it's 2.7, but let's just say it's we'll call it 3%. And then you're going to go up a $400,000 house. You're going to pay your buyer agent another 1% to be your advocate, right? So what is that 1%? Sounds like a lot of money. What is that? $4,000?
Yeah, 400,000. Yeah.
Okay. So on a median house, roughly in that, it's going to cost you an extra $4,000. Um, what do you think that agent could save you? 4 grand. I mean, four
That,
grand on the sales price is like nothing
yeah.
on a negotiation.
Yeah. They
I
could definitely.
mean, that swing is pretty hard to calculate. Did they really save me money? I would I have gotten that deal or not? My argument is you probably wouldn't have gotten that deal without the buyer as agent. Because the seller's agent certainly wouldn't have advocated for you during the home inspection. Okay, so the home inspector is going to come in there, and a lot of these inspectors, they're going to find faults and whatever, and problems with the house. But they're not going to understand the value and the leverage position on that transaction. Okay, $4,000 on a home inspection, that's a nothing. So, are you really going to try to save 1% on your buyer's agent? And what does that cost you? You're probably going to cost you twice that, if not more. That's the value proposition. And I think people overlook that.
Yeah. Yeah, $4,000 in negotiation, I'm sure. Even the newer agents can probably do that on that. I was thinking because there's different, like there's some agents can do a lot more, some agents can do not so great. So it really is depending on who the agent is and whether or not they have the skill sets to understand what they're negotiating and how to negotiate. Because we all know agents who don't know really what they're doing, and
Yeah.
we know the
And sometimes the value isn't even on the price. Sometimes the value is on getting the contract together,
yeah,
right? Did you poach that from another buyer? That's a lot of value. That's worth 4 grand. You didn't lose that house to another buyer because of the way the agent was able to work with the other agent. You know, did what else? I just had a thought on that too. I had like 4 thoughts running through my head at once and I just blanked them all out. So then a smooth transaction, right? So how much of it, that value may not be the actual dollar value, but actually getting it through with minimal drama and you know looking ahead and solving these problems before they come up, being proactive with the appraiser, being proactive with the lender, getting a lot of those problems out of the way rather than going with a cheap discount. You could probably find a tax accountant to prepare your taxes for $300, or you could pay a tax accountant 3 grand. That might save you $6,000 on your taxes. So you do pay for service, and that's where I think that there's going to be discount brokers out there, and then there's going to be buyers agents out there. So we'll see how the market breaks out on that. Kind of
yeah.
rambling now.
Yeah, no, I think it's great that you're covering these points, man, because there's not many people talking about it. So hopefully you're going out there making some videos about it on your channel as well. But Greg, man, I appreciate you being here today, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got some things to get back to. I know if you're watching this on video, Craig's in a really cool hunting lodge type of background here. So do you want to, Craig, share a little bit about, how people can get a hold of you, maybe where they can find your YouTube channel and some of the things you talk about as well, and just overall how people can reach you and find some things that you're putting out there.
Yeah, so right now I'm basically just on YouTube, Craig Kamman, MN as in Minnesota. And I just put out content on what I see the market doing and just share what's going on. There's no real clear objective there. If you got questions, I've got an email you can shoot me questions on and I'll respond and answer questions. And then I'm on X as well. So that's just at Craig Kamman. So and then I'll just kind of watch the market news there and just kind of banter on X as well. So I'm just out there having fun and sharing. It's I'm on the tail end of my career, so it's more like, I don't know. It's just cool that this technology is out there to share all this information. And I just wish this was around when I was younger. So would have saved me a lot of trouble and headaches.
Right. So guys, make sure you guys check out Craig's channel, and if you guys are on X, check him out there as well. So that way you can, like you said, avoid some of the mistakes that you could be making if you're not tapping into some of this content. But we'll make sure to leave the links to that in the description, the show notes as well. But Craig, man,
Appreciate it.
appreciate you being here. Before I let you go, is there any last piece of advice, any last tips you want to leave with the audience here?
Um, it depends where you're at with the whole investment journey, but don't be afraid. Just take that first step. There's so much information out there with all the stuff, everybody sharing, what their experiences are. You've got a huge community you can tap into. Um, just make that first step. And your worst case is you'll have to turn around and sell the house. It's not as scary as you think it is. So that's all.
That's some great advice, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show.
Sounds
Take care.
good. Have a good afternoon. Thanks.